Hi everyone, welcome to Belle's Books. I'm Carly and today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in May. So in May I participated in the 1900 to 1950 readathon that was hosted by Katie over at Books and Things. I will drop a link to her channel in the description box below. So I'm going to talk about the books that I read for that readathon first, and then I'll move on to two contemporary books that I read. So the first book I read was Between the Acts by Virginia Woolf. I have done a whole separate video on this because I geeked out about it and talked a lot. So I will link that in the description box below as well. Very briefly, this book is about a summer day in 1939, just before the war is about to start. It is set at Points Hall, like a posh manor house, and all the villagers are putting on a pageant. So the whole of the village comes to Points Hall in the garden to put on this pageant and watch the pageant. And that's basically all it's about. It's about the characters. It's not very plot driven, as most Virginia Woolf novels are not. So it's about the characters, and it is about primarily the theme of time and our human temporal experience, how we experience time. And what Woolf does in this is interrogate that down to a very minute level, and we switch from different character perspectives and we get in their heads and we experience their thoughts, and I just found it amazing. I loved it. I mean, I love Virginia Woolf anyway, so I'm biased, but I really enjoyed this. It's only a slim novel, but the thing I find when I read Virginia Woolf is that I have to take my time with it, because it's easy to read. You can read this like in one sitting, but there's so much in here that she's asking you to think about that I find that I need to take my time and be slow with it to say, okay, what's she trying to say here? Why are we centering on this particular moment? What is happening here in this narrative? So there's a lot to unpack, and there's a lot that you can think about with this novel. So I would highly recommend this. I very much enjoyed it. Have a look at the video below where I go on about it for a full 20 minutes if you can be bothered. Then I was not very successful with I mean, I started In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust, but I seriously got like 2 pages in. Again, this is a dense one, and I knew that I wouldn't read all of this, so I'm going to take my time with this. I'm just going to carry on, because even like in the first few pages I made lots of notes in the margins, and that's, you know, I'm using this book for my PhD, so I'm gonna have to take my time, make notes as I go. So yeah, I don't have much to say about this yet. I'm just gonna crack on with it. But again, very much about temporal experience and how we experience time, so it's going to be interesting for my PhD. Then I haven't finished this yet. This is another one I want to take my time with. It's the Journal of Katherine Mansfield. I'm about halfway through, but I'm really enjoying this, and it's kind of both hilarious and tragic. So I'm finding it really interesting to learn more about Katherine Mansfield, because I knew nothing about her other than I thought she was a kind of rival to Virginia Woolf, or they had this rivalry. I think they were friends. I haven't got to the point where she's talking about Virginia Woolf yet, but the thing that I'm really enjoying about this diary, and the reason I love reading writers' diaries in particular, or writers' schedules, is the way that everybody, no matter how great a writer you are, this is Katherine Mansfield, woman's a ledge, had doubts about her writing. A lot of days she's going, oh, I can't write, oh, everything I write is terrible, and it kind of resonates with me, you know. I feel that, so it's kind of reassuring to read that. And some of the, you know, she's quite scathing about other people. Some of the insults she's chucking about in here is like, oh, that harsh. But also there is there's some instances where she's going through a really difficult time. She suffered, she was in pain a lot of the time, so that's quite interesting to read. I'm sorry, there's flies going nuts in my room, right? I live right on the river, which is lovely, but also a nightmare, because all of the insects from the river come into my house, and it's like a fly circus in here today, so apologies if they go back and forth from the camera. They're just trying to get in the limelight. Yeah, so there's it, like I said, it's equally kind of tragic and comedic. I'll read you a quote that I underlined that I quite liked. And she also moves between living alone and living with her kind of on-off partner. I think they got married in the end. And she doesn't name people in here, or if she did, they were replaced with initials. There's like an editor's note at the beginning from the person that she was involved with who edited this, explaining what the initials meant. So it was edited by John Middleton Murray, and that was her partner. She abbreviates him to J. This quote I quite liked. Life with other people becomes a blur. It does with J, but it's enormously valuable and marvellous when I'm alone. The detail of life, the life of life. Oh, I just love snippets like that, and there's some real gems in here. And this diary is interesting. It's not just a diary. So I think she uses these, or there's snippets of here where she's trying to work things out. So short stories that she's in the middle of writing. There's snippets of dialogue. There's things that she's working on and playing with. So sometimes I'm getting a bit confused. I'm like, did this happen? Is this an interaction that happened? Or is this just her practicing her craft effectively, which I think a lot of it is. And yeah, I'm really enjoying it. So I didn't want to rush through this because, like I say, I might use it as part of my context research, and I'm just really enjoying it. So I wanted to go a bit slow with this. So yeah, I'm going to carry on with that. Then, let me talk about the audiobook. So the audiobook I listened to was Ballet Shoes by Noel Streatfield or Streatfield. I don't know how to say it. I will put a picture here. Now, this book, Ballet Shoes, was one of my absolute favourites when I was a kid because I always wanted to do ballet. I wanted to go to ballet classes, but my mum couldn't afford to send me to ballet classes. So it's one of those things that I always felt like, I'd be a great ballerina. I started adult ballet when I was in my 30s. I'm not a great ballerina. I just love it though. I do really enjoy it. So I get to do the ballets now, and it's great. So I thought I would revisit one of my childhood classics, and I listened to it on audio. Now, I don't know, because it said the book was unabridged, and I don't know whether it was just a different format or that was what the book was, but I can't remember. So I would like to get hold of a physical copy, but it was done in like a radio play. It was a BBC version of the book, and it didn't say it was an adaptation, but it was very odd because there were lots of different scenes that would kind of fade in and fade out. So people would be talking and then their voices would fade out and then it would go into a different scene, and there were all lots of different characters playing all of the different parts. So it felt very much like listening to a radio play, and it was very old style BBC, jolly hockey sticks. So it was perfect because I wanted to go for an audiobook that would be easy to listen to and wouldn't require much attention, and it worked. It was a really lovely listen. So Ballet Shoes, if you don't know, is about these three girls. They are orphans and they are adopted by great uncle Matthew, or he is known as Gum. So they are Pauline, Petrova and Posy, and he collects them like he's a fossil collector. And randomly on his fossil hunting expeditions, he also picks up a random bunch of babies on separate occasions, which is very questionable. But he just gets these children, sends them home for his womenfolk to look after. So they are looked after by Nanny, Cook and Sylvia, who becomes Garni. That's the name they call her. And it's about their lives growing up, and they get into this ballet school and they each have a specialism. And that's what I loved about it when I was a kid, is that to me it seemed like, yes, this is what girls can do. One of them was really good at ballet, one of them was really good at acting, and one of them was really interested in mechanics and cars and planes. And they were all very, clearly identified. This is your role and this is your role. And so they went off in their various different directions, and they all excelled at what they were interested in. And I, as a kid, that was really motivational to me. I loved that because I felt like, yeah, I can do this. Like whatever my interest is, I can be great at this. So it was really lovely to revisit that book. But obviously revisiting it as an adult, you're like, wait a minute, what just happened? That was quite questionable. But I think you're always going to get that with, you know, childhood classics. So it was a really enjoyable listen, and I would like to get hold of the physical copy. Like I say, it was one of my favourite childhood books, so I would like to see it and see what I missed in the audio version, because I'm pretty sure there was stuff cut out. Anyway, moving on. I watched the film Shirley recently. I will put a picture of it in here, and I just completely forgotten that this was a thing. It came up on Netflix, I think, and we watched it. It was about Shirley Jackson. So it wasn't like a biopic, whatever you call it. It was kind of a fictionalized narrative of her life, but a small snippet of her life, where I think this actually happened. A young couple stayed with her and her husband in their house, and I know nothing about Shirley Jackson, but now I really want to. There's a biography that I want to get of her, because I know that she had some kind of problems with alcohol, I think. But I just find her a fascinating character. And this film, it is, you know, it's fictional about her life. So it's about the interaction between this young couple, and there's a queer storyline with her and the young wife, and her husband's an absolute shit. But it made me want to read some Shirley Jackson. So I picked up this collection of short stories that I've got, The Lottery and Other Stories. Now, I've read The Lottery before, and it, I think, was my first introduction to Shirley Jackson, and it blew my mind, right? It was so chilling. It's one of those stories where it's like, you were thinking, where is this going? Because it's kind of very... It lulls you into a false sense of security, and then the ending just knocks you off your feet. If you haven't read it, oh my god, please go and read it. It is just amazing and scary in equal measure. Anyway, she was, I think, a big social commentator, and she uses her stories to do that. So I only read one story out of here. And because I looked through them, and I was like, which one do I want to pick? The one that caught my eye was called 7 Types of Ambiguity, because it rang a bell with me, and I thought, 7 Types of Ambiguity? Hang on, I know what that is. That's based on a book. Her husband, I get it. Her husband was a literary professor. It's based on this book, this very old literary text called 7 Types of Ambiguity by, I think it's William Empson. This is a Birkbeck library book. I got this out for my PhD because my supervisors recommend I take a look at it. It's old, right? 1953 is the date in here. Anyway, the story in here, 7 Types of Ambiguity, is a very kind of, I don't know how to describe it. Like the thing with Shirley Jackson, it's a story about customers in a bookshop, right? Nothing much happened. There is a young man in a bookshop, and he's browsing that book. He wants that book, and he comes in because he can't afford it. And he keeps saying to the bookseller, please, can I have a look at the book? And he stands there and reads it. Then this couple come in, this kind of new money, wealthy type couple come in, and the husband wants to buy some books for his house because presumably he wants to look intelligent. He's got money. He wants to fill his house with books. He doesn't know what he wants. He just asked the bookseller for a recommendation. The young man who is reading 7 Types of Ambiguity offers to show him some very nice folios and some very nice editions, and helps him pick some out. And basically that is the story. There's like a little bit at the end. I won't spoil it because I would like you to go away and read it. And it's one of those things, those stories where you think, well, nothing much happened. But when I reflected back on it, there was a lot that I felt like she was saying about class and wealth and privilege and access to education. And so there was a lot that I felt that was in there. And that's what I think she does amazingly well. She'll wrap all of these themes and commentary up in a seemingly like tame or mild story where you think nothing much has happened. So yeah, I just find them really intriguing, and I'm definitely working my way through this. And the thing that I've found with short stories is I don't really like to read a whole collection in one go. I like to dip in and out of them. So like just reading one of those stories was great, and it's one of those things where I think I've got it on my bedside table, I'm going to read one when I feel like it, rather than, you know, blitz through the whole collection. So I think that's what I'll do with the rest of this, but very much enjoying this, so we'll continue it with it. Right, I think that was all of the books that I read for the 1900 to 1950 readathon. Now let's talk about the 2 contemporary novels that I read. So the first one was Unsettled Ground by Claire Fuller. I will insert a picture here. I had a library copy, so I've taken it back now. I was reading this as part of the Women's Prize shortlist. I'm working my way through the Women's Prize shortlist, and I really loved this book, which is weird because it's kind of sad and it's not really dark, but it deals with like rural poverty. So we follow 50-year-old twins, Jeannie and Julius, after the death of their mother. So their mother, Dot, kills over and dies in the kitchen right at the beginning of the book. That's not a spoiler. And it's them like coming to terms with living alone without her, because she was the one controlling all of the money. They didn't have any idea of what was going on, so they live kind of hand to mouth. Jeannie and Dot would grow vegetables in their back garden and sell them to a local what's it called, it's like a deli, but one of those artisan gentrified delis. So they would sell their vegetables to him, but he would only pay for what he sold. And it's about the poverty, like the extreme poverty that they're in. And when you're in a rural area like they are, they don't have access to mobile phones, the internet. And it was really kind of eye-opening for me, because you just don't think about it. You don't think about the lack of access that people have when they're in those impoverished situations. And it was kind of heartbreaking, because the whole book you're going through their struggles with them. And Julius goes out to work, but he can't be in a car or a vehicle because it makes him throw up. And like there's things like that, you're like, why, what's happened there, linked to some trauma in his past. And right from the beginning there's mention of this thing that happened when they were 12, this thing that happened to them that is really terrible. And as the book unfolds, they learn more about what their mother was doing and why they're living in so much poverty, and secrets come out. And I was a little bit scared, because the only Claire Fuller that I've read before was Our Endless Number of Days, which has quite a shocking ending. And I was kind of prepared for something really horrific like that, but thankfully that did not happen. So secrets are revealed, but it was a good, I was so pleased with that ending. And I loved Jeannie, the character of Jeannie. She was like both vulnerable and naive, but also incredibly powerful. And it's about her coming into her own power and being really strong and fighting, you know, thanks dog, fighting the bullies that try and attack her, and because the whole village like kind of looks down upon her. There's also a great theme in this book about music and like folk music and old oral stories that are told through music, and I loved that. I really enjoyed that book. I thought it was fantastic. Claire Fuller is a writer that I will definitely be reading more of. I've got one of her back catalogues on my shelves, so I'd like to get to that soon. And I just thought it was a fantastic book. I adored it, and I was quite sad when it finished. And also there's a dog in this book called Maud, and I love Maud. Jeannie's relationship with her dog Maud is just lovely. So I would highly recommend Unsettled Ground by Claire Fuller. Do go and read it, it's fantastic. Then I've just finished, I'm counting this even though it's June and I've just finished this, The Doll Factory by Elizabeth Macneal. I read this for my book club, which we had today, and it was lovely because the book club girls came to my house and we had afternoon tea, and it was very delightful. And Katie joined us, even though she had no contributions to make to the book club. She just lounged on the chair. Anyway, The Doll Factory by Elizabeth Macneal. This is a historical fiction set in Victorian London. It is about Iris. She is working in a doll emporium with her twin sister Rose. It is back-breaking, grueling work where they just sit and paint dolls and stitch dolls' clothes, and their boss is an absolute nightmare. She's on drugs, she's mean to them and pinches their skin, and they have to work long hours, and they don't get enough food, and they don't live in a very nice place. So Iris has a passion for art. She is a painter, and that's what I loved about her, is that she's so passionate about her creative practice, that even though she knows that she would get fired if she got found out what she was doing, so she sneaks down into the cellar at night to paint. She saves up all of her money that she's allowed to keep because she has to send her wages home to her parents. So the scrapings of money that she gets by, she saves up for painting equipment so she can paint. And she goes down to the cellar at night, takes off her nightdress and paints herself in the nude, which I thought was fantastic. And then her sister catches her and she's absolutely outraged because she knows if their boss, Mrs. Salter, found them, she'd get kicked out. Anyway, Iris encounters the pre-Raphaelite painter Louis, and he is kind of obsessed with her and wants her to be his muse. He calls her Queenie because he's painting this picture that is a queen's imprisonment, and he wants her to be the model. So she stands there and he paints her. So she accepts this. Sorry, I've got some crazy pipes going on there. She accepts this job only on the proviso that he teach her how to paint. So she moves into some separate lodgings that he pays for, and she goes every day to his studio, stands there to be his model, and then he teaches her to paint. Now, the pacing in this book I found quite strange, because most of the book is her living her ideal life. So she gets out from Mrs. Salter's doll factory at the beginning. Then she's living with Louis. She's kind of falling in love with him. So it is a little bit of a romance. And she's learning to paint. She's free, essentially, from the horrible life that she had beforehand. But all the time throughout the book, there is this character of Silas who is also obsessed with her, but for more nefarious reasons. And Silas, I found really interesting, Silas as a character, and we get inside his head and we understand what he is thinking, which I don't think I've read that much of before. And I really thought that was good, because you see him getting more and more messed up. So he goes from having conversations with these animals that he's taxidermying, is that a thing? And imagining lives for them, and then he goes onto conversations that he will or he thinks he will have with Iris, as he imagines she will fall in love with him, and it just gets darker and darker and creepier and creepier. And towards the end, it's kind of a bit thrillery at the end. I won't spoil it, but it gets intense. Anyway, I just found the pacing was quite strange, because there's a long time where Iris is happy, and almost like something is going to happen to disrupt that, because you're following Silas as well. But the bits where she's like with Louis and she's learning to paint and it's all golden, it's almost like that's the thing that you're reading for. And so it wasn't that I never wanted to pick the book up, but I found kind of less inclined to turn the pages when everything was good, which was most of the way through the book. And then right at the end, the drama happens. So I don't know, I just felt like the pacing was a little bit off, maybe. It did really inspire me to look up pre-Raphaelite paintings, though, because they're talked about in here. And the characters are actual, like real-life painters. So she talks about Hunt and Mallet and Rossetti. So I looked them up in my big book of art that I've got down there to go, what do their paintings look like? So it did encourage me to look back at some pre-Raphaelite art. But yeah, I did enjoy this. I gave it 3 stars. I felt like I love it. I love anything set in Victorian London. So that was great. There was clearly a lot of research that went into this. There was a lot of terminology that I had to look up. One of my favourites was when someone is drunk, they're in their cups or in their cups. I just assumed she was in her cups. I was like, what does that mean? So now I'm going to be using that. Dan, are you in your cups? You had too much rum. Yeah. So I've learnt some excellent Victorian words in here. Anyway, I have bought her new book, Circus of Wonders. So, and because I love the circus, I train with the circus, it's my thing. So I'm very excited to read about another historical fiction set in the circus. So yeah, looking forward to reading more from Elizabeth Macneal. Now, I think those are all the books that I wanted to talk to you about today. Let me know in the comments below if you have read any of these. Particularly, I want to hear from you if you read any Shirley Jackson stories. Oh my god, The Lottery, honestly. I want to read a lot more of her. And I've got a lot of her books up on my shelf. I haven't read any of her novels. So that's something I want to get to. I've got a few videos coming up. One of them I'm doing on Daphne du Maurier, my Daphne du Maurier collection, which is in this bookcase here. All of her books and books about her. So I'm going to be doing a video on that. And I'm also going to be bringing you my June TBR, which is I'm centering around Pride. So lots of LGBT reads. So that's coming up very soon. Other than that, I will see you next week. Bye everyone.